This is a filler video because I'm working on a very big project that's coming up in October. Well, it is October. Who cares? Anyway, back to what I'm saying. To understand this video, you're gonna have to understand Hello Meteor. Hello Meteor is, I don't know, vaporwave, chillwave. It kind of crosses the boundaries. Sometimes he's like an ambient person, sometimes it's like a down-tempo, kind of, you know, like very psychedelic. It evolved from synthwave, but now it's just a cluster of things. This is funny because my editing playlist is literally all Hello Meteor songs. So anyway, with that being said, go listen to his music before watching this video and I will rank every single album for you. Starting with Momentary Infrastructure. This album isn't bad by any means, it just doesn't evoke any emotion in me whatsoever. And all the music is pretty lackluster for a Hello Meteor album, and one thing I really do not like about Hello Meteor's music is the overuse of Vocaloid and Vox effects, which can sometimes be used really well, but most of the time end up ruining the show for me. This album is a meh, personally. There's lack of theming, branding, and even ambient interlude tracks that make it above 5 out of 10. It's a good album, there's about 3 songs overall which I find to be really good, but just generally it doesn't sound like Hello Meteor at all. The bit is, you could place this album under any other artist and I would have totally ranked it higher. But Hello Meteor has such a unique style of theming when it comes to albums, and unlike 85% of this music, I just really don't enjoy this one. It's bare and basic, and by all means it's the worst of his discography. Community broadcasting. Now, I feel a bit taken aback that I didn't enjoy this album. I went in thinking it would at least make the top 15, but where this album misses, you can really tell it misses. The only reason this album is higher than Infrastructure is because it has some nice theming and ambient songs surrounding it, with one of its best tracks being one which I genuinely love. Overall, this album can do really great when it tries, but really misses when it evolves into the most basic ass house music I've ever heard, with one of my least favourite tracks from Hello Meteor being on this score. You can really tell this album was mixed instead of being produced on its own, which is a far superior way to do music with this style. Take an already alternative style that no one has, and make each and every album sell a different type of that style, instead of synthesizing a mix of all of them into one. It just doesn't land, besides 3 amazing songs, which is why it's here. Department of Marine Sciences. Okay, so now it gets to the point where none of these albums are bad, I just think they lack some features in contrast to the higher ones. But speaking now, each and every album I'll be reviewing is one I genuinely love, so when I criticize an album, I'm probably going to come off as really harsh, but I just have to be critical to bring my love across with each album. That being said, this one's okay, I don't hate it, there's just a load of tracks that just don't particularly stand out to me, and that's all. Welcome to The New Cascade. This is just marine science but improved. Yet again, there's a few tracks in here that are genuinely good, but most of them are just enjoyable. Good background noise to be honest, but there's not much good to say about this one. Sleep Artifacts. I like this album, it's got some really solid tracks with Rain Petals, Smoke Noturno, and the Jewelry Department. It's just okay in terms of an EP. It's really small, so the ratio from okay to good is low, and EPs always pass over my head when I listen to them. It's not really long enough to be memorable, and that says something in Hello Meteor's discography. Comfortable Loneliness. Comfortable Loneliness has like 3 really stellar tracks, with Dusk Weather, Empty Rec Center, and Cozy Mart. The rest are just good, and nothing really special to appreciate in terms of this album. It's got a solid start, but fails towards the end to keep up to an amazing standard. It's pretty good though. The Glowing. It's a brilliant synthwave album, dare I say it's my favourite, but Hello Meteor is not supposed to be pure synthwave. It's supposed to be a more alternative and ambient down-tempo style to it. Plus, the remaster's 1,000 times better alone, and returns. It's a fairly decent EP, but really, as much as the batting average of songs here is pretty much the same case as Sleep Artifacts, it's way too short to notice by the time it's over. Even if you've enjoyed it, you kind of filter it out once it's done. I really don't like EPs purely because of that, because I have a very selective focus time on music, ranging from about 30 minutes to an hour, so short pieces like this fly over me with just no time to process any of it. Even if it was enjoyable, and that's my real problem with Hello Meteor, his music just isn't long enough, and that's why these EPs are ranked so low, despite this one being pretty good. The Lowland Forest. Finally, we've made it to Hello Meteor's first album, and yeah, it's alright. You can really tell it's his, purely because of the basic foundation elements of his style, but overall, it's pretty nice, albeit a basic album that is oddly quiet at times, and half the time I was on volume 8 wondering if I was hearing anything at all, but besides that, it's a very charming listen. Swift Dark Water. Neat little album, my only complaints are that only 3 songs are great, and Most use the vox that really doesn't fit the album in the slightest. Sorry Hello Meteor, I just don't feel the vocal effects. Maybe you should dial it down a bit next time. Weather patterns. This is just a cooler version of the glowing, and with a much more retro synthwave style to its tracks, and I gotta admit, most, if not a few songs land perfectly. The only reason it's here is because of its lack of sounding like Hello Meteor. His style is just so much more different to basic synthwave, and quite frankly better than it too. The Existence Wild. This album is honestly great, and I feel bad for placing it this low in all honesty. Its ambient and storytelling elements are top notch, some of the best on this list so far, but the main songs are good and only good. It's like a half and half scenario here. On the bright side, this is a very Hello Meteor sounding album, so that's good at least. But it all comes back to the Vocaloid. I do not like that Vocaloid very much, but I'll admit, it's mostly well used here. The titular song is a huge banger though. It sounds as though you mixed up Stranger Things with Night Supply, and I am all for it. Dark Secondaries. This album is like a more purified version of The Existence Wild, and while Existence Wild had a more arctic sound to it, this album rings of an autumnal village, and heavily influenced throughout the rich bass and soothing ambient tracks. This album really sells an autumn vibe, and even has another one of my favourite Hello Meteor songs, Respect Your Ghosts. It's a really decent album with just too much vocalizer. 7 Hour Sunset. I really think this album's good. Like, it's a bop, especially with Russian Green. Like, holy hell, Try Not to Headbang Extreme Edition. This album gives off a really funky take on the previous Hello Meteor styles, and honestly, I really enjoy it. My only complaint would definitely have to be that these songs are just too simplistic, and only feature like 3 layers, not including the drums. Plus, there's not a lot of bass involved in these tracks either, which can heavily impact the sound of the song and make it sound more sonically pleasing. Again, I like this album, but it's strangely simple, yet a bop. Causality Violations. You know how I said past the first 2 I love all these albums? Well, past about now is beyond love for these albums. These albums have me head over heels. Causality Violations is an extremely well-produced album with an intriguing style and an interesting story, with this weird robot AI saying stuff about a paradigm shift in space and time. Besides this, it's followed up by some awesome tracks that remind me a lot of Stormy Summers, the Oahu GP. Yet another brilliant album, albeit an EP. My only complaint for this one is the same for all EPs that exist out there under the length of 30 minutes. I like the retro 16-bit video game style. It works really well in Hello Meteor's favour, with most of his songs sounding similar to early 90s tracks. Absolute classic, this one. Conditioned Air. Admittedly, the story here is lackluster and ominous, but the tracks take the win on this one. They just invoke powerful emotion whenever they play. It can be happiness, longingness, even being lost outside a bank during a blazing summer sunset. This album speaks sound, there's just no other way to put it. End of All Known Land. This album has such a brilliant story conveyed through some of the most absolutely incredible tracks which will vibe with even the most unvibable people. Every track is at least above a 6 out of 10, with the ambient storytelling with the Planet Jala Diary is just utterly insane. And pretty much every song is a banger from start to finish. This album is nuts. The Rain Season. This one is just plain old peaceful, man. The track's consistency here is wonderful, the theme is lovely and warm, and just about everything about Still Night and the piano tracks here are done perfectly. This album is just so calm, I have to put it in the top 10. Best bath I've ever had. Pantropic. Brilliant beachside paradise delivered through just under 30 minutes of Hello Meteor gold. This is the only EP where I feel like I haven't forgotten half of what's happened as I'm listening to it. This one carries. The Glowing, Final Cut Edition. I find it ironic that I enjoyed this album so goddamn much, because the original I just didn't feel the same for. What can I say, all the songs are major vibes, and the prominent power guitar throughout each track just lights a smile on my face. Coastal Obscure. This album has some really brilliant songs that just land every single time. Sure, The Golden Cat isn't great, but besides, every other track is just pure brilliance, especially Jade Figurine, Charcoal and Ash, and At Last Light. These are amazing. Unfamiliar Place. This album is just one of a kind, man. It just feels so majestic in every note and sound that's present throughout its 50-minute runtime. The ambient tracks scattered throughout this album are some of Hello Meteor's best, and the vox effects are genuinely well implemented here, and I like them. Each song sounds better than the last, and oh gosh damn it, I love the final 2 songs of this album. They just sell the entire thing on its own completely. 10 out of 10, this is a masterpiece. We Lose Time. This album is nice and nostalgic for me because when I was out in Florida every morning, this was the music playing, and I can't help but live there in my head whenever this album plays. I know HIIIIII wasn't thinking of Florida when he wrote his albums, but most of his albums, and especially this one, scream it to me. Even without the bittersweet nostalgia of Florida roads, this album rocks with every second, and I love it. It's so good at sounding tropical that it sounds even more tropical than the EP named Pantropic, for crying out loud. It's amazing, 10 out of 10. Night Supply. The story in this album is one of, if not the most intriguing and fascinating out of all of the HIIIIII albums. Its theme is centered around the states of sleep during a space travel, or something along those lines. And funnily enough, it's actually a follow-up to the events of Causality Violations, with the exact same robot who caused the paradigm shift to happen in that album. And at the end of this one, we get a confirmation that a new installment to the series is on its way in 2024, which could be just as interesting. The overall atmosphere of this album is perfect, with the opening being followed up by the most stellar track I've ever heard in my life. Just honestly, man, I cannot. This album is awesome. There is one song that's like a 6 out of 10 here, and that's The Patient Nothing, but every other song bops, and it's a solid 9 out of 10. Mu and Mia. Mu and Mia is one of the most incredible journeys through atmospheric ambience, downright bangers, with absolute layers of brilliant instruments and strings. I am not joking when I say this album features Deathless, which on its own sells the album. But the message behind this album is the sweetest thing about it. Just look at it. It's heartwarming. Dusk Aquarium. This album is a goddamn masterpiece. Like, actually. Boy is the song me and my girlfriend got together with, and this entire album along with that. Besides that, it just has such a dreamy quality with top-notch instrumentation with acoustic and synthesized elements, and some great bass lines that pack power into this gorgeous album. I was going to put this one at the number 1 spot, but to be honest with you, no matter how special this album is to me, nothing's going to take this top spot. Turn After a Storm. Turn After a Storm is the most 10 out of 10 album I've ever seen, if I have ever seen a 10 out of 10 album. Oh my god, every single track just delivers. From the very beginning track of Uninhibited Current being like the soothing, yet like sort of ominous, foreboding sense of just ambient mastery, to Night Through Pictures, which almost feels like a rock song with the fucking guitar, holy shit. And then it just moves into the psychedelic mastery with songs like Rain, Marina, 10 Forward, Unspeakable Roses, which is a goddamn good song, by the way. The only point in this album where I ever feel like something's falling off is Indifferent Sky. But I don't hate it, it's just the brassiness of it just doesn't fit, and to be honest with you, it's only an 8 out of 10 in my books. But it's followed up with Aqua Venue and Marbled Muralette, which are 2 amazing songs. And then it closes off with this fucking beautiful, scenic, honestly just majestic Go Swim Swiftly and Turn After a Storm, which are just amazing. Oh my god, fucking listen to this album. It's like one of the best Dreamwave albums I've ever heard. It's one of the best ambient albums I've ever heard. It's one of the best albums, period. Listen to it. It's fucking awesome. And oh my god, the message. This is an album about Hawaii, guys. This is an album dedicated to Hawaii and the storms they face, which just makes this even more beautiful in my opinion. Oh my goodness, just fucking listen to this, man. It is a 10 out of 10, I am sorry. But it is one of the best albums and the best experiences I have ever had. So I want to thank you and HIIIIII for creating this amazing world for me, and I will see you in Halloween.